This is Pastor Dave Grisham with Official Street Preachers, and tonight's video is entitled a former sniper's take on the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I really wish I didn't have to make this video tonight. I was going to make this on something else, but because this happened today, I wanted to talk about what I saw in this video and relate some of the things that I saw to you based on my training as a former sniper. And I wanted to, of course, express my deepest condolences to Charlie Kirk's family, his wife, his children, his mother, his father, his grandparents, his whole family, and all of the people that worked with him. I'm really sorry that this happened to you. I know there's a lot of things you could talk about politically on this, and I'll do some of that here in a little bit maybe. But in any case, this is a horrible tragedy. This was an act of domestic terrorism, whereas the left always seems to be saying, the right wing is, this is the most danger of domestic terrorism we have is these right-wing racist, homophobe, Islamophobic nuts, whereas all the gunfire seems to be coming from the left. But anyway, I wanted to express my deepest condolences and my sympathies to Charlie Kirk's family and his friends, his co-workers, and those that work with him. I'm sorry about what happened today. This is horrible. It shouldn't happen to anyone. I don't even wish this kind of thing on the people that disagree with me. I certainly don't want to see people get shot and killed. Fortunately for Charlie Kirk, he was a Christian. So a born-again believer in Jesus Christ goes to heaven. That's the only good news out of this. It's the only good news is that he went to be with the Lord, Jesus Christ. In any case, I wanted to do a little bit of analysis on the shooting itself. Let me tell you a little bit about some of my training. I worked as a security police officer, as a federal law enforcement officer for 26 years at a place called Pantex. Pantex is the final assembly and disassembly point of all nuclear weapons produced in the United States. The last 10 years of my career there, I was on the Special Response Team, SRT team, which is basically like a SWAT team. And then the last 4 years of that 10 years, I was on what they call the Op 4 team, opposing forces team, in which case we trained in the tactics of terrorists, and then we would attack DOE nuclear facilities so that they could test against us and they would know where their vulnerabilities are so they could best spend their security money to improving security and closing up some loopholes or gaps in their security. So that's what we did. This goes on all across the government. Lots of military bases do drills. Military does drills. That's why they do these practice war games and all that. This is very common throughout all the government services. They train, they test, they do these trials, they do these exercises and things like that. This was quite common. Okay, so this is what I did as a profession. And I was a sniper on that team. Now, I don't want to go into too much about the weapons and all that kind of stuff because that's neither here nor there. But I watched the assassination video, and I've seen it from several different angles. I watched several different videos, some that were further away, some that were very close. I watched them in slow motion, and I've come to some possible conclusion on this from a standpoint of looking at it like a sniper would as to what may have happened with his injuries. And I may be wrong on this, okay? This is a speculation. I don't have complete information on this. I'm just going by what I saw in the videos, and this seems to be the most logical thing to me based upon my knowledge and my training, okay? So if I'm wrong on this, I'm wrong, okay? But this is what it seems to be. Now, Charlie Kirk was sitting down when he was shot, and this is what he does. He went on to college campuses and he would debate with people. He would sit there and he'd have a microphone and he would talk to them, and they had a microphone in the audience and they would talk back and forth and they'd debate, and they had interactive conversations back and forth. So that's what was happening when this occurred. And there was a young man standing in the audience. I watched him speak, and he was talking about violence and gun violence. And Charlie Kirk says, do you want to talk about including gang violence or not including gang violence? And it was at that moment he was shot. Now in the video, it sounds like you hear the gunshot, but what you're not really hearing the gun. Reports are that the gun was about 200 yards away. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But if a gun is 200 yards away, when you are standing really close to the target and you hear the immediate sound and you see the reaction from the person being shot or see the reaction of the target, you're not actually hearing the gun shot. You're hearing the supersonic crack of the bullet itself. Now, I've had some personal experience on the receiving end one time of gunfire, okay? I was not the target. Excuse me. I was in Anchorage, Alaska. My wife and I were at a testimony of a former devil worshiper. We were sitting in a conference room at a hotel in Anchorage, Alaska. And so as we were sitting there, a drug deal was going on in the parking lot outside off to our right. There was a shopping mall over here off to our right as we were facing the stage listening to him speak. And unbeknownst to us, this drug deal went bad. And somebody started firing at a guy who was running past the windows. There was a set of windows to our right. And somebody was shooting at this young man as he was running away from the drug dealer, and the guy was firing a handgun, a large caliber handgun. I think it was either a 40 caliber Smith & Wesson or a 10 millimeter. From the looks of the bullet I found on the floor, I knew it was a 40 cal, but a 10 millimeter and 40 cal the same diameter. They're just different shell casing lengths. Anyway, one of the bullets went through a window and passed in front of my face about a foot away and in front of my wife's face, who was sitting to the left of me, and punched a nice, neat hole in the sheetrock to our left. Now, of course, we didn't see the bullet go by. We just heard the bang of it, and it sounded like someone was firing inside the room because this supersonic bullet, as it went by, made this loud crack. Because a supersonic bullet makes a sonic boom like a jet. You know, when a jet breaks the sound barrier, it makes a sonic boom. Well, basically that crack that you hear is a sonic boom. So when you're watching the Charlie Kirk video, and I don't recommend that you watch it a lot, it really disturbed me watching it, but I wanted to prepare for this video, so I needed to see that, to see what happened. I don't recommend you really, it's bad. In any case, what you heard when Charlie Kirk was shot was the supersonic crack of a rifle bullet that happened right there in front of you. And so there was this pow, and it seemed to occur simultaneously as he was being hit. Generally, the gunshot, the sound from the gunshot itself, if it's 200 yards away, is somewhat behind the travel of the bullet because the bullet is supersonic. It's going above the speed of sound. So when you hear that noise, you're actually hearing the supersonic crack of the bullet. And like I said, I've had this personal experience. Several bullets came through the walls. One of them blew it looked like an explosion, like a grenade went off, but it went through the sheetrock and tore a big hole in the sheetrock over here next to us. And it looked like somebody threw a grenade in the room. It was just, this guy was just firing as this guy went by, and several bullets came through the windows. So I know what it's like to be on that end of gunfire, but that's the only experience that I have, okay? Everything else has been behind the gun. So in any case, that's the noise that you hear, is you hear the supersonic crack of the bullet. Now, Charlie's reaction in the video, he's holding a microphone, and there's a little black thing on his shoulder. I looked at the slow-mo, and I believe that is a small microphone. I believe he had an additional microphone pinned to his t-shirt. He was wearing a white t-shirt, and I believe he had a little a little microphone right here. You could see his shirt flutter outward really quick like that when he was struck. So what I believe, and this is my personal opinion, is that Charlie Kirk was wearing body armor and that he perhaps had a hard plate underneath that loose-fitting t-shirt. That he had some soft body armor and perhaps some hard plate on top of it or underneath it. Now, if a bullet was, most snipers aim for the center mass of the chest. This is what we're trained to do. The head is a moving target. A professional sniper rarely aims at the head unless it's tactically called for in that situation. Like you've got a hostage and the bad guy is behind the hostage and all you've got is a headshot. Or you need to shut somebody down quickly before they shoot someone. But the head is constantly moving, and so it is much more difficult to hit. That's why that one kid that was a sniper that tried to shoot at Donald Trump, he missed because he might have been aiming right at his head, but when Trump turned his head, the bullet grazed his ear, you see? And then he reached up and grabbed his ear because he felt it. If you notice, Charlie Kirk does not grab for the wound on his throat. And this is because I believe he was already unconscious at this point. The impact was traumatic and it knocked him unconscious. And he just kind of fell over like this and dropped the microphone, the one he had in his hand. The other microphone blew off and flew across him like this. And so I believe a bullet came either from the front or from slightly to his right. And it came in at a low enough angle that, you see, the shooter had to position himself higher up so he didn't hit the crowd, but he couldn't be up so high that the awning that Charlie was sitting under you have to be able to see your target. So if he was up too high, he wouldn't have been able to see through the awning to be able to hit Charlie. But if he was too low, he would have hit somebody in the crowd and not be able to hit his target. So I believe he was in a narrow window vertically, elevated up slightly above the crowd, but below the awning level, so he could get a good sight on his target. And he fired, and the bullet maybe came slightly from the right or mostly from the front. Not exactly sure of the exact position, but I believe a bullet struck a plate in his. I believe he might have been wearing hard body armor. And it may have struck here, which made his shirt flutter, and then the bullet ricocheted off the plate and went through the left side of his neck. You can see in the slow-mo a large gash appear here, which may mean that the bullet tumbled after striking, because oftentimes what will happen is when a bullet strikes something hard, pieces of it fly off like shrapnel. And they spread out over an area. It makes like a little explosion. That's why the shirt did like this. And from what I could see on the shirt, when it bulged out, I could almost see a square outline of something under his shirt. So that's why I'm saying I believe there was body armor under his shirt. I'm pretty sure he was probably aware of general threats against his life, as we all are. I've had death threats too, many of them, more than I can count. I'm sure he's received a lot more. He's got a much bigger platform. He's a famous guy. A lot of people hate him, and so he's probably got a lot of death threats. And so I'm sure he was taking some sort of precaution. That's why I'm thinking he was wearing body armor. I think the shirt fluttered and revealed a little bit of an outline of body armor. It struck, shattered, made the shirt flutter, and then struck him in the side of the neck and probably hit his carotid artery on the left side of his neck. And that's why the wound was fatal. But I'm pretty sure the sniper was aiming at his chest, at his heart. Now, there was eyewitness accounts that said he was shot through the heart. Others said he was shot through the neck. But you could tell in the slow-mo there was a visible wound on the left side of his neck, and it opened up a rather long gash there. So that's why I said I think the bullet tumbled and went sideways through the neck and opened up that carotid artery on the left side of his neck. So this is kind of what I think probably happened. So there was some reports saying he was shot in the chest, which would have been right. And there was others saying he was hit in the neck, which would have been right. They can both happen with one shot. if it ricochets. If it bounces off something hard, it can definitely ricochet up and hit something else, okay? People have been killed by ricocheting bullets. That is not unusual. Normally when a bullet strikes something, it throws off little pieces, but then there's a main portion of the bullet that continues on at whatever angle. It's all based on physics. The direction of the shot, the angle where he was leaning back like this, he was leaning back a little bit. And so it just depends on the way he's holding his body and the way the angle of the bullet comes in. And so there's a lot of different variables there. When I was a sniper, I was always trained to shoot center mass if you could, and shoot at the head if that's only target you get. You know, if somebody's peeking up, you know, over cover like this, that's when they get one in the noggin. And so this is what I was trained to do. Center mass. That was our first priority target, was center mass, because it stands the most still. It doesn't move as much, and it's easier to hit. Better chance of getting a hit on a center mass shot. So I believe that's what they were aiming at, was a center mass. They fired one shot and then left. So he was their only target. They were not interested in hitting anyone in the crowd, because there are people in the crowd that the shooter probably agreed with, because there were people there to debate Charlie Kirk. So he didn't know whether, he didn't really want to hit somebody in the crowd. He might hit somebody that was on his side. So he wanted to just shut Charlie Kirk's free speech down and killed him, and he did. And unfortunately, that is what happened. So let's talk about ramifications of this. So I believe that there are going to be political ramifications for this. And the very simple reason is because a lot of people are looking at this almost like the Martin Luther King assassination. Martin Luther King was a social warrior. He was leading a social or cultural movement, and he was assassinated for his political views and his outspoken role in the culture war that was going on at that time. And that culture war was against racism, okay? And so, as a side note, I actually marched with Martin Luther King when I was 6 years old in Little Rock, Arkansas. In 1967. I was 6 years old, and in the summer of 67, I actually marched with Martin Luther King, and I got to hear him speak. And anyway, that's a side note. But he was shot in like 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. And he was assassinated because of his role in a cultural war that was going on at the time. The same thing is true with Charlie Kirk. This was an assassination, just like Martin Luther King was an assassination. This was politically motivated, and it was done to silence a voice in the culture war. Okay, this stuff we've had this happen in history before. This is not now. Robert Kennedy was shot because he was because he was running for president, and he maybe made some people mad when he was attorney general. And Kennedy and his brother John was shot because he made some people mad because of possibly the Bay of Pigs failed invasion of Cuba and different things that were going on. So when you're in a high profile position and you are involved in a physical war or a cultural war, you become a target. And there are nutcases out there who would like to hurt you. Obviously, there was at least one out there that wanted to hurt Charlie Kirk. Now, let's talk about the range for a minute, because I heard a lot of people on television saying, oh, this obviously was an expert sniper because 200 yards, that's a really long shot. That's a very difficult shot. No, it's really not. As any hunter will tell you, many hunters zero their rifles for 200 yards. This is that way if you're within 200 yards, it's basically a point blank shot. If you're shooting 100 yards, the bullet's going to hit slightly high. At 200 yards, it's going to hit dead on. If you're at 300 yards, it's going to be slightly low, but depending upon the bullet and the angle, if you're shooting from elevated position or shooting flat, you're going to have to hold over however much, and there's some calculations that go into that. But anyway, 200 yards is basically a point blank shot. If you have your rifle zeroed for 200 yards, That is not a difficult shot, okay? John F. Kennedy was shot at, if I remember correctly, about 180 yards. But he was a moving target, so that's what made it more difficult then. Charlie Kirk was sitting still. He was sitting still when this happened. And so he was not really a moving target. He was sitting there for a little bit. And so it was not that difficult of a shot. Like I said, 200 yards is not a difficult shot. I used to turkey hunt all the time, haven't done it in a while. But I used to regularly, one of my favorite places to shoot a turkey was right here at the base of the neck in the craw. Because putting a bullet through the craw killed the turkey instantly. It's like shutting off a light bulb. It was very humane, and they didn't run off wounded. And it was a small area, about 2 inches in diameter. It was easier to hit than the head because the turkey's head's always looking around, looking for danger. Very difficult to hit the head unless you're at extremely close range. But with my 270, I had a bolt-action 270 rifle, and I could hit a 2-inch circle at 200 yards. I did it all the time. It was regular. Of course, now I was trained to do this, of course, but 200 yards is not a difficult shot. Okay, it's really not. It's considered basically a point blank shot for a sniper because it is at your 0 point for most people. Most people zero their rifles at 200 yards. Most hunters do. I always zero my rifles at 200 yards. When I go hunt, I zero my rifle for 200 yards, and that's just a standard practice for me when I hunt, which I haven't done in a while. So anyway, so I wanted to explain that is not a really difficult shot, not with a rifle. Obviously the guy that took a shot at Donald Trump didn't really know as much about what he was doing because he was aiming at Trump's head. And so when Trump, of course, like I said, moved his head, it clipped his ear. That's what's probably saved Donald Trump's life, was he moving his head around. And that's what saved his life. Thank God for that. Or the difference between affordable groceries and civil war was like this much with Donald Trump, okay? Because we might have gone into a civil war over just that. We were that close to going into civil unrest over this if Donald Trump had been assassinated. So anyway, that's the technical aspects of it. I wanted to explain that. Now I want to get into the spiritual aspects of this because I think that's the most important thing. We have to understand that America is at a crossroads. We are at a point where we can go over the abyss into darkness from which there is no coming back, or we can turn our country back to Jesus Christ. The reason this is happening is because people don't love their neighbor as they love themselves. Obviously, when you're trying to take pot shots at your neighbor or you're sniping at your neighbor, you don't love your neighbor as you love yourself. And why don't you love your neighbor as you love yourself? Because the love of God is not in your heart. Because if you love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, you will love your neighbor who's created in the similitude of God. He's created in the image of God. Charlie Kirk is in the image of God. Okay? Charlie Kirk was a human being created in the image of God, and only somebody that hated God would hate a man enough to want to kill him because he is created in the image of God. If we want to stop the violence in our country, we're going to have to turn to the Prince of Peace. That's the only way this is going to work. We're not going to, I can tell you right now, unless this country turns back to Jesus Christ, normal is not coming back. You're not getting normal back. Normal, you see, in times past, yes, we had atheists in times past. Yes, we had racists. Yes, we had idiots. Yes, of course we did. But the number of God-fearing people in America was much greater in those days. And these God-fearing people they numbered so large that they affected the country in a godly way. You see, when you've got children of God running the government, and you have children of God in key places in society and the majority of people are the children of God, you're going to get a godly society. But when you cross over and reach a tipping point and most people become children of the devil, then your country's going to go to hell. That's what's going to happen. Our country's in the process of going to hell because our country is filled with children of the devil. This is direct. You know whose fault this is? It's the church's fault. I'll tell you why. Let me tell you why. If you as a Christian are going down a path and you think you're following God, and you come to a fork in the road, and one fork, man, it's covered with flowers and beautiful trees, and its weather is perfect, it's comfortable. And then on the other one, it's dark, it's rocky, it's difficult, it looks dangerous. Which of those two paths do you think is God's will for you to walk down? Well, it's not the comfortable one. Because the Bible says that narrow is the gate and difficult is the way that leads to life, and there are few who find it. You see, the narrow path, the difficult path, the path of persecution, trials and tribulation, picking up your cross and carrying your cross is not walking down a rose-covered path. It's the Christian is supposed to take the difficult path. But American Christians, oh, no, we don't want to do that. No, we want to preach a prosperity gospel to everybody where it's all about health and wealth. You're going to be healthy, wealthy, and you're going to get a new car. You're going to have a big house. You're going to have a great job. And the path with Jesus is all covered with glitter and roses and all of that. And that is not the path of God. That is a deception of the devil to lead you off that path. But that is unfortunately the path most Christians have taken these days. They're not taking the hard, difficult path. They're taking the easy way. The easy way is the devil's way. It's a deception, folks. It's a deception to get you onto that easy path so that you won't go out and fight the difficult fight. See, Charlie Kirk was not walking that easy path. He was out there risking his life. He was out there risking his safety every day, talking to these college students, trying to convince them. Now, he wasn't a preacher of the gospel, so to speak. Like, I'm an evangelist. So when we go out, we focus on the Bible, we focus on the gospel. Politics is part of what we talk about. But for Charlie Kirk, it was more about the politics. But his politics and his conservative views came out of his Christian faith. See, if an atheist follows the rules of the Bible, the atheist can have a good life in this life. He'll die and go to hell without Jesus, but God has the solution that we need for our society in the here and now. If we follow the word of the Bible, we're going to come to a better place as a nation, whether you're choosing to follow Jesus or not. You know, if you want to know how to have a good marriage, follow the guidelines of the Bible. You want to know how to get along with your kids? Follow the guidelines of the Bible. How do you raise your children? Follow the guidelines of the Bible. An atheist can benefit from the Bible even if they don't follow Christ. Because God's system, He created this system. He created us. He knows exactly how we are supposed to be plugged into one another so we have a good, peaceful, prosperous society. That's the correct way. Now, when you got mostly Christians, that's the way you're going to go. You're going to take the difficult path. You're going to stand against evil. You're going to stand for righteousness. Brethren, if you want to see this changed, here's what's got to happen. You see, when there are so few of us out there doing this, and Charlie Kirk is one of the few, just like street preachers are some of the few. We are targets too, but there are a few of us. But if you want to see, you see, if there's only a few, then the enemy thinks, well, if I just take out this one and that one, I can shut the truth down. But if Charlie Kirk gets replaced with 1,000 people, if he gets replaced with 100 even 100 people, going out to all these different college campuses and going everywhere and talking about conservatism and Christianity, if they go out there and take his place, if 100 people take his place when he fell, trust me, there won't be any more shootings because they're going to say, well, there's just too many of them. We can't stop this. It's going to discourage any more of these killings. We have got to double down on this. You know, one of the definition, because one of the things I trained for was against terrorism and stuff when I worked at Pantex. And the definition of terrorism is very simple. It's violence or the threat of violence to achieve a political or religious goal. It uses violence or the threat of violence to achieve a religious or political goal. Okay? If you allow the murder of Charlie Kirk to stop conservatives and Christians from going to universities and telling people the truth, if you allow that to happen, the terrorism that this idiot did against Charlie Kirk, because this is an act of domestic terrorism, if you succumb to that, if you be silent, if it squelches you into silence, that idiot wins. Okay, he wins. Because the only thing for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, right? Isn't that what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said? I believe he did. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer gave his life for Christ in prisons of Nazi Germany. He was one of the few that stood up against the Nazis. See, we have got the devil on the loose in our culture. Assassinations have been being attempted all over the place. You know, it wasn't just a couple of years ago that a guy was street preaching on a corner in Arizona. I believe it was Tucson or Phoenix. I can't remember which. And somebody just drove by and shot him in the head. Fortunately, he survived. But he just got shot in the head because he's preaching the gospel on a street corner. The response to that is we need 100 more of them to replace this guy. You know, we need another 100 or 1,000 Charlie Kirks out there at these campuses telling these kids the truth. Because that's the future. See, we have to plant the seeds of truth in these kids if we're going to change the future of our country. Because it starts with them. They're going to be running the country someday. They need to know the truth. But if we see this murder of Charlie Kirk and then we go out there, you know what, I'm just going to stay home and stay safe. Well, that might work for you for a while. But eventually, death's going to come knocking anyway and you're going to have to answer to God. Do you really want God to say to you, well, you stinking coward, why'd you stay home? Charlie Kirk was out there. If he was wearing body armor, and I believe he was, trust me, he was aware of some of the death threats against him because he was taking precautions. He had a security detail out there. He was taking precautions. He knew the risks, and he took them anyway because he thought that the risk was worth taking so that he could accomplish a greater good. This is how men change the world. Men with God in their hearts, like Martin Luther King changed America in spite of him getting assassinated, okay? His efforts helped change America. And there was a speech one time that Martin Luther King made. And I have kind of rephrased it on my own, I'm going to tell you that phrase right now. He spoke in front of a business club. And what I'm telling you is paraphrased, but I'm shortening it for the sake of brevity, okay? And here's the quote. And it may come to pass that the greatest tragedy of our time is not the words and the deeds of the children of darkness, but the silence and apathy of the children of light. We cannot be silent and we cannot be apathetic at this moment. If you want to save your nation, if you want to save people from what's about to happen in this country, if we don't turn this thing around, if you want to save this nation from that fate, then you're going to have to stand up and speak. You can't be apathetic. You can't be quiet. You can't sit on your butt anymore in your pew at church. You got to get out of your church and you got to get out into the culture and start winning these people to Jesus Christ. Or we're just going to have more assassinations. We're going to have more violence. We're going to have more death. And then we're going to lose our freedoms and our prosperity. Okay? That's what's going to happen if we as Christians don't get off our blessed assurances and get out there in the culture and start changing it for God. We have got to do this. This needs to be a wake-up call to every Christian, not to go out and hurt some left wing, not to go out and hurt some transgender. And I don't care who this guy is. He may be a transgender that shot him. He may be, a communist. He might be a socialist. I don't know. Doesn't matter at this point. What does matter is that if you don't want this to happen anymore, if you want to stop this, then you got to go out and you got to start winning the culture back for Christ. Because otherwise, it's not going to stop. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And you know whose fault it's going to be? It's going to be the church's fault. Because if you're going to sit in your church and think a great move of God because somebody is flopping around on the floor like a fish in a frying pan, you think that's a move of God, let me tell you something, trust me. A move of God will move your butt out of that church and move it into the culture and evangelize the lost. That's what a move of God will do. Don't sit there and flop around on your floor and tell me gold dust falling out of the sky on your people like, oh, it's a great move of God. Don't you lie to me and say that garbage. I'll call you a liar right straight to your face. A real move of God is going to move you out of that church and get out there and go out into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature just as Christ commanded you. Christ did not command the church to sit on their butts in a pew and just pay their tithes, sitting in their little foxhole, watching the war go on over their heads while they're waiting for the rapture. That is not what God has called you to do. He called you to pick up your cross and carry it, and he meant go out into the culture with it and preach the gospel. That's what's going to change America. That's what's going to stop the violence. That's exactly what's going to happen if America decides to get out. Did you know that when we were standing out front of the Supreme Court in 2015, when they were arguing for gay marriage in the Supreme Court, we had a street ministry team of about 30 guys out there preaching, and women. My wife was there too. We had about 30 people out there preaching the gospel. And there was about maybe 100 others, other Christians out there making speeches, things like that, standing in front of the Supreme Court, doing what they could, right? And there were some abolitionists across the street with aborted baby signs, and stuff. There was maybe 50, 60 of them. But there was about 25,000 pro-gay marriage people there. And they had a traditional marriage march 2 days prior. And guess how many Christians showed up for that? Less than 1,500. Less than 1,500. If one Christian from every church in America, there's between 350 and 400,000 churches in America, if one Christian from every church had shown up for that gay marriage would have never passed. The judges would have been, oh my gosh, 500,000 people showed up and marched in favor of traditional marriage. We better rethink this. We better rethink our decisions. You may think that doesn't affect them, but it does. Because it would have told them that the culture does not want it. But because of your silence, the devil was allowed to speak unopposed. And guess what you got? You got gay marriage. And now you got transgenderism running around all over the place, trying to transition your children. And then anybody that speaks against it, they're shooting them. They're walking into Christian schools, blasting up the place. It's happened on several occasions. And that's what's happening. We have brought this, Christians, upon ourselves because of our silence and apathy in the face of evil. The Bible says, who will stand with me against the evildoers? Who will? I will. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to let the murder of Charlie Kirk deter me one iota. When these things get worse, I might change my tactics, but I'm not going to change the message. And I'm not going to stop going. I may just have to change my tactics to make sure what happened to Charlie doesn't happen to me. I'm a small fish. Probably there's nobody out there waiting to kill me because I'm a small fish. He's a much bigger one. But if what we need is thousands of Christians to come out of their churches and hit these college campuses with the gospel of Jesus Christ, you do that in America and you will change America for the better. You do that. You don't do it. And then when somebody in your family gets killed by one of these left-wing nut jobs, one of these children of the devil wants to send your kids straight to heaven or hell, then you've got nobody to blame but yourself. other than the left-wing nut job that did it, because you're creating an environment in which murder can thrive, in which evil remains unchecked. That's what's happening. We got to change this. All right, that's enough of my rant for tonight, okay? I'm sorry, but I'm really upset about this. I really am. And I'm upset more about the Christians than the left-wing nut job. The children of the devil are going to do what they do. They until they come to Christ, they're not going to change. But the responsibility, the moral conscience of America is the churches. And so far, the moral conscience is not saying squat. Oh no, they're too busy worried about, tithe to me, give me money so I can buy more private jets, so I can get a bigger house, so I can build a bigger church, so I can get more money. I want to build the next Six Flags over Jesus, but I don't want to go out and change the culture. Makes me sick. Makes God sick. Our country is sick, and the cure is Christ. God bless you all. You have a good evening.